I want to start with you. If Coney Barrett succeeds Ginsburg on the Supreme Court, what's the likelihood that ACA is undermined, and what does that mean for stocks in the health insurance sector?
Well, I think it's not a certainty that she would necessarily rule against it. I mean, this issue is very technical, very specific on severability. We certainly know how she thinks about the mandate as a tax. She's disagreed with Justice Roberts in the past on that issue, but a lot of the legal scholars tell us that this is a much more technical issue, and most people believe that this actually will be upheld. If the ACA is upheld, obviously, we think that's good for providers because that continues to provide access to over 20 million Americans. So it's really good especially good for acute care hospital companies, to a lesser degree, managed care companies.
Gary, do you agree with that?
I actually do. You know, we think for a long time this has really pivoted on the issue of severability. If you look at two Supreme Court decisions in July, the court ruled 7-2 in favor of the issue of severability. So our view, longstanding view, has been the individual mandate will be ruled unconstitutional, that will be discarded. But I think overwhelmingly we're likely to see the court vote or argue that it is severable from the rest of the ACA, and the rest of the ACA will be allowed to stand.
And Gary, you took a look at the potential for a blue wave in November and its impact on the insurance sector. How do you see the dominoes falling, perhaps starting with the Supreme Court, going back to Congress, and the impact from the White House?
Yeah, it's a complicated matrix of what could happen this fall. In some ways, we view it as a heads you lose, tails you lose election, at least just in terms of how healthcare investors in this sector are looking at the potential impact. On one hand, if you get the blue wave, Biden wins, the Democrats regain the Senate, the market is very fearful of Biden's public option and what that could actually mean longer term in terms of possibly cannibalizing enrollment in certain segments of the market and possibly cannibalizing really profitable commercial patients for providers. On the other hand, if Trump were to win or the Republicans were to hold the Senate, then you have the whole risk of the ACA case as potential overhang. Now, obviously, both Frank and I agree that overhang likely gets resolved in a favorable way, but either election outcome produces a measurable overhang on the sector for a period of time.
What lifts that overhang, in your opinion, Frank?
Well, I think, you know, the worry over a public option, I take it at its literal value, that it's merely an expansion, that this is not the first step in a slippery slope. So I think when investors become comfortable with that as a possibility, so I think we have to wait and see what really plays out. I actually think, to the extent Biden does get elected, I think it actually is obviously for access to care, good for providers. So from that standpoint, we remain positive.
Frank, do you think that the pandemic, obviously all of this uncertainty surrounding, what the Supreme Court might do, the election and so forth, comes against the backdrop of this pandemic, does that embolden more of a Medicare for all wing of the Democratic Party if there is a blue wave? Even though Biden has, made more of a focus on the public option, there is, of course, a wing of the Democratic Party that has been pushing more of this Medicare for all idea. Do you think that this kind of healthcare crisis that we're in right now might embolden that idea even more?
You know, I don't think so. I think more than likely you may see Biden. He's talked about a never again event for pandemics. So I would suggest that perhaps more of the focus, at least from the Biden administration, was be on beefing up infrastructure, testing, all the capabilities to really avoid another pandemic or to see one spiral the way this one has. So I guess I'm a little more constructive. Really, quite honestly, we just can't afford Medicare for all. So I think it's just off the table. And I remember back on when the Affordable Care Act passed, how difficult that was. It came down just so by such a narrow margin to get passed. I cannot imagine a Medicare for all getting passed, even with a Biden administration and a blue House and Senate.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.